Waiters of Reddit, what's the worst first date you've ever seen? I was working in a small restaurant with 2 floors. A woman and a man came in, and I had a table for them upstairs. It looked like they had a first date, because they were asking those getting to know each other questions. After ordering food, the woman had to go to the toilet, which is downstairs. As she walked to the stairs, the food arrived. She walked down, tripped and fell all the way down, knocking her head on the ground. 2 colleagues immediately rushed over to her to see how she was doing. She was unconscious and bleeding from her head, so they called an ambulance. I went to the man while he already started eating and told him his partner didn't know how to call her, fell down the stairs, and that she was unconscious and that an ambulance was on the way. He walked to the stairs, looked down and walked back to his table to finish his food. Later the ambulance arrived, and I asked him if he wanted to go with him to the hospital, and he said no while finishing her food as well. It was so awkward, he just sat there for another 45 minutes eating, drinking, paid the bill and left. I still don't know what kind of relationship they had, and whether the woman is okay. Served a couple a few months ago. Every time I walked over, he would always be the one talking, and she would just be sitting there not having a good time. At the end I asked if it was one bill or separate, and she immediately piped up separate. I go and take his payment, and as I hand over the debit machine to the girl, I see the guy take his phone out and start swiping through Tinder. Had an obvious first date where the lady was grilling the guy on how much money he makes, and he didn't really want to answer. It was awkward serving steak and salad during an interrogation, lol. I was working at a Mexican restaurant at the time. I was waiting on a couple and I could tell it was a first date by the questions I heard them asking each other. Anyway, towards the end of their meal there was this Hispanic girl sweeping next to their table, and the woman looks at her, holds out the remains on her plate and says, "Would you like to take this home to feed your kids?" I stood there in complete shock. This woman spoke no English, but she could tell this random woman was completely degrading her. The sad thing is she seemed like she really thought she was doing a good deed. Her date looked so embarrassed. Once witnessed a date where the dude talked about how special he was and how his mind wasn't like other people's for the entire date. The girl was politely nodding along, and every time she tried to get a word in, he'd cut her off. Absolutely brutal. Edit. The amount of women commenting on how they've been on this exact date before is upsetting. Worked at Applebee's. This woman was the worst woman I've ever waited on. She was needy and slurped down her iced tea like there was a worldwide shortage. He was silent. He didn't talk once, except to order his quesadilla burger, and she just kept going and going, prattling on. And she was mean too. Talking down about how people were losers to be servers, and how much better it was to work in a shop. At the end, he went to the bathroom and just never came back. He apparently jetted out the side door where the 2 girls worked, and gave them a 20 to give to me. Worst woman was just sitting there, and waiting for him to come back. I stood there at the service station just waiting for her to realize he wasn't coming back. So after 10 minutes, she just started crying, pushes her chair over, and flounced out. I didn't get a tip, but it made my night. I once had a guy come sit at my bar, who was waiting for his blind date. He orders a couple of drinks to calm his nerves. Well, he probably should have slowed it down to keep his mouth from working faster than his brain. In a hoe, she shows up and is way out of his league. She is absolutely beautiful. She orders a drink and they start talking. I come back to check on them, and I hear him talking about how much he hates children. He was saying things like how he hopes he never has any, and that he will never be stuck taking care of them, and how he wishes that kids couldn't be taken into public places, so that he wouldn't have to be around them. She looked him dead in the eye and said, "Well, I have a daughter, and I love her very much." She grabbed her purse and walked out on him. The look on his face was absolutely priceless. I work at a fairly nice Italian restaurant where we do a lot of business. One night a man who I was not even serving came up to me while I was punching an order in on the computer and hands me $20 and a napkin with a phone number on it. He proceeds to tell me I'm on the worst date of my life. This woman is horrendous and I have to get out of here. Take this $20 and please go to the nearest phone and call me and tell me that I have to get home right away. I don't care what excuse you make up. I just gotta get the hell out of here. Initially I thought he was kidding until 2 minutes later the guy who was serving him came up to me to tell me how wicked this woman was and how he could tell the guy didn't wanna be there. I promptly called that guy as soon as I had a free minute. One of my shining achievements as a server. Used to work as a barman in a pub/restaurant in Hertfordshire. So this Indian guy is at the bar telling me how he's meeting his date for the first time and that she's also bringing her parents. Possibly some tradition. Anyway, I'm chatting to him as he's waiting for the girl and her family to arrive. After about 10 minutes or so they do arrive and are all seated on a table nearby the bar. I notice throughout the evening how much he's seemingly making the family laugh and seems to be getting along really well. Now, the fun begins. After dessert the mother and father of the girl go to the beer garden outside leaving the couple alone. After a moment or two the man comes up to the bar and, with a cheeky smile on his face, asks to pay the bill. Without hesitation I process the transaction and congratulate him on how well his date appeared to go. He returns back to his table and takes a seat. The girl's parents now return from the garden with glowing smiles and rejoin the table. I notice again how they all appear to be chatting and laughing until, suddenly, the man brandishes his receipt for the meal. The mood changed instantly, the glowing smiles replaced with looks of anger and disgust. The girl's father stands up and shouts, "How dare you disrespect my family like this?" Bearing in mind this is a small country pub/restaurant, it grabbed the attention of all. The man then sheepishly exclaims his apologies in the deadly silence to the father, to which he replies, "You will never see my daughter again." Following this, the father picks up his coat and turns to leave whilst demanding his wife and daughter leave with him. The wife stands up and immediately follows him out of the door. The girl hesitates, half rising from the chair, and then decides to remain with the man where she now bursts into tears. The man was clearly overwhelmed with embarrassment and shock. He did not know what to do or how to react, so proceeded to patting her on top of her head. After around half an hour or so of her crying she eventually stops and decides to call a taxi to go home, explaining how she was sorry, but I have to go with my family. The man, clearly downtrodden at this point, reluctantly agreed and called a cab for her. Now, fast forward about 3 hours to when I finish my shift, approximate 1 AM. I leave the pub and walk to my car in the car park. At this point I notice a dark figure sat on a bench near my car. Apprehension rising, I aim trying to decipher the person sat before me. Only when I'm around 10 meters away do I notice it's the man from the date. He was bawling his eyes out. Turns out his date was now locked out of her house for the night as the parents were clearly distraught with her, and when the parents had left they had slashed the poor guy's tires, so he couldn't even drive home. Talk about a date gone wrong. All overpaying the bill. I used to work at a shellfish restaurant last year and this couple came in. I'm sure it was their first date on the count of how nervous they smiled at each other. Everything was going well between them as far as I could tell. He was making her laugh, helping her crack her crab legs and whatnot. And then, all of a sudden, his arm jerks forward and he throws himself to the floor, knocking over all their food in the process. She gets up and screams. Everyone looks, and this guy is having a flat out seizure on the floor. I had to grab someone's little daughter and run into the kitchen, so she couldn't see what was happening. Very scary. The paramedics arrived shortly after, and took him away. They said he was going to be okay and a wave of relief washed over his date. She left in the ambulance with him. I hope they are still seeing each other. Pretty damn cute couple. I work at a pondside restaurant famous for pestering little ducks that beg for bread. Anyway, I'm bringing appetizers and salad to a table when I notice that neither of the couple are talking to each other and are avoiding looking at one another with apathetic looks on their faces. Me feeling a conflict here, I tried to get in and out quick. I planned to say my greeting, drop off the food, then leave. The minute I say the obligatory "how are you two doing tonight?" the girl smiles, then turns up the guy, saying, "See, at least someone asks me how I'm doing." I was later told that this was their first, and probably last, date. Ouch. Thank you for watching Internet's Funniest. Please like, share, and subscribe.